So we have, this year, we have set for our theme, the power of spiritual living. So each month we're doing a power of talk based on certain books. This month we're using The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. Many of you are familiar and have read this book. I have to admit to you, because we're all being honest and sharing openly, I had never read this book. I had started it on, because for a while I was commuting back and forth from Idaho on a regular basis, most of my reading was done by listening. And so I started the audiobook and was like, oh, this is not going to work. Because if you've heard him, he's quite monotone. He's very, very relaxing, which for driving is not always the best thing. So it's been very wonderful to read this book and gosh, he's brilliant and wonderful and telling us again what we want to remember. I chose from the Maharishi a quote for today that I love, and he says this, he says, "There is no greater mystery than this, that we keep seeking reality, though in fact we are reality." We think that there is something hiding reality and that must be destroyed before reality is gained. Ernest Holmes once famously said to us, we are like, when we're in the search for God, we're like fish in a fishbowl going, I wonder where the water is. Right? That we really do, as Jesus said, live and move and have our being in this divine presence. But somehow maybe that's too easy. So we say, well, that's too easy. Let's create a path. Let's create an obstacle. Let's have it be difficult so we can earn it. So I love what Eckhart Tolle is saying in this wonderful book, The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment. And he's helping us to understand that there is a dimension that is transcendent of this reality that we can touch and feel and experience. The great masters through the ages have helped us to understand that we are a part of a cosmic something, a divine presence, an infinite being, that there is a spiritual essence that is expressing through all of life, and that we are some part of that. And yet, the way I refer to it is as if we have two minds, sometimes more, but two that we'll talk about today. There is the reactive mind. And the reactive mind is in reaction to our life circumstances, right? When I started in this teaching, I didn't know there was another way of being. I had begun to read some books about positive mental attitude, and they were saying things like, your thinking can influence your life. It's like, yeah, that's nice. How do I get the money, right? And when I came into the teaching, I began to understand that there's something to this, that it is in truth a reality that we can change our thinking, and by changing our thinking, we influence our reality. We become co-creative beings with a divine presence that is the creative source that is all. Now, most of us, as I like to point out, we have always, all of us, without exception, all of us have been creative beings. It is part of who we are. We can like it or not like it, but we are creative beings. The difference for some of us is that we are starting to become more conscious about our creation, aren't we? In our joyful and blissful ignorance, when we didn't know any better, you may have been like me, where you blamed what was happening in your life on the circumstances that were happening to you. Perhaps some of you had developed that skill I like to call profound martyrdom, that not only suffers, but suffers well. It's my pose for my suffering well. Right? Because we didn't know any better. We didn't realize that when we jumped out of bed in the morning and said, oh, it's going to be one of those days, that we literally were putting the intention into the universe to say, bring it. And we were setting our own awareness so that we would be profoundly aware when the universe brought it. Right? Who knew? As I said, most of us, none of us, I don't think, get up in the morning and go, how can I create cancer today? How can I be broke? How can I have my life not work? We don't do that consciously. But we say some things to this universal intelligence that is always bringing forth, according to our own belief, the things that we don't want. And then we whine and complain and moan that these things are happening in our life. Now, you may not. I'm just talking about me here. I used to do this. I don't anymore, obviously. I am profoundly enlightened now. And so, but back in the day, before I knew who I was, I did these things. So I began to understand through the science of mind that if we are willing to do spiritual practice, if we are willing to become aware of our thought patterns, that over time with practice, we can begin to change our thought patterns. We can begin to develop a way of thinking that then influences the things around us so that we have a different experience of life. It is not life happening to you. It is life happening through you. So how cool is that? So when I say we need to be responsible for our life the way it is and the way it isn't, I'm not creating a shame or blame sort of thing. I'm just saying this is where your power lies. Because when we can accept that we have been instrumental in creating the life the way it is today, we can then move to a new, more conscious awareness where we can begin to influence life being different. So how fabulous is it to have these spiritual teachers that begin to help us to understand different ways of being? So in the reactive mind, life is determined by circumstance. The way you behave determines my experience. We might even say things like, you made me so mad, right? Some of you have said this to your most cherished loved ones. You made me so mad, right? But in the observer mind, as we begin to move into that witness state of awareness that realizes that we have thoughts and we have feelings and we have emotions and we have sensations, but is not who we are, in the observer state of mind, we say, aha, X happened, and I reacted in a certain way, typically based on past experience. Just recently, I had somebody show up in my life who said something, and what I discovered after careful review is I reacted to that situation based on a past experience that had nothing to do with this person. I find myself highly offended that that person would treat me this way. And when I stepped back from it, I realized this person had nothing to do with it. I reacted out of my past. I superimposed a former experience onto a current experience. Now, I don't know if you do this or not, but I've known people, myself included, that do that, right? It's not what's happening right now. It's what happened, and I'm interpreting what's happening now based on what happened. So the power of now says, move into the present, notice what's going on within our own being, and respond, observe myself, how I'm showing up, and respond in such a way. So I had enough clarity of thought to say, whoops, stop, wipe that slate clean. Who are you? What are you trying to say to me? Right? You see, thinking is a fabulous and wonderful thing, and most of us do it. But we tend to move into repetitive ways of thinking. We think the same thoughts over and over and over. We respond to situations the same way over and over and over. And the thing is, we make up these stories about our life and how life is and what's going on, which is fine. It's always great. Creative writing's a wonderful experience. Creativity's wonderful. The problem is we begin to make up the story and then we act as if it's true. As if that was really reality. So some of us made up stories about how there's never enough. Love, money, SEX, there's a youngster in the room. It's never enough. Instead of being in the awareness that we are abundant beings, that there's always enough, that as we open our hearts and our minds to the greater possibilities, life can fulfill the mold that we are setting for it. So Eckhart Tolle is teaching us then something very powerful. Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind, said this to us. He said that trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. That literally, when we talk about our practitioners who are spending these years of study learning to think and pray and believe differently, and they become a healing presence through the power of their own belief. So he's saying, trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. When we're in the untrained mind, the monkey mind, as is referred to sometimes, our minds are bing, 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 oh my goodness, squirrel. Right? You know this mind. But as we're learning and developing a systematic way of thinking, we begin to look at those limiting belief systems, we look at our reactions, we look at the way we've always been, and we begin to consciously choose if there's not a better way. But Eckhart Tolle says there's a step beyond that. He says you can create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just becoming conscious of the present moment. By taking this moment. So he's saying, even with our thinking, even with our emotions, there's something beyond that. You see, what we begin to do is we begin to identify with our thinking. We begin to identify with our consciousness, if you will. We say, this is who I am, this is what I believe to be true, and so therefore I see reality from a perspective that conforms to my belief of it. Right? But Eckhart Tolle is saying, no, wait a minute, there's something beyond that. And it is the presence that even in our thinking, there's a place beyond that, the gap. Deepak Chopra calls it the same thing. That is, we can move into the place called the gap, that place between thoughts, that place between emotions. What we begin to do is move into that observer state of mind that realizes we are not a mind, but rather we are a sentient being that thinks. Once we begin to understand that, then we begin to understand that we are not our emotions, but rather we are sentient beings who have both thoughts and emotions. As we even move beyond that, we begin to understand that we are sentient beings that have thoughts, that have feelings, and have a physical body, although we are not our physical body. The I am of who I am is transcendent of that reality. So spiritual teachers through the ages have tried to help us understand, because what we do as humans is we identify ourselves as our mind, we are our emotion, or our body. We say, this is who I am. But there's a reality that is transcendent of that. It is our spiritual being. And the spiritual being is conscious and aware and enlightened and full and free and joyous, regardless of circumstance. You see, how many of us have been trained to think that as soon as circumstances move around the way I want them to be, then I will experience joy. Right? All of us have been trained at that at some level. We have a gazillion-dollar industry called advertising that reinforces that idea. Over and over and over, it says to us, your greater good is just one product away. And lucky for you, it's on sale now for just $19.95. And lucky for you, if you order now, you can get 2. And some special bonus prize. So think how happy you'll be then. Right? And so that consciousness drives us. Or perhaps we thought, perhaps as little children, we listened to those wonderful stories about how Prince, what's his name? Prince Charming. That's his name, I remember now. that someday Prince Charming or Princess Charming was going to show up, and when you two met, oh, gosh, you get to live happily ever after. Forever. And we've all had that experience, right? No? How dare they? How dare they not show up the way they were supposed to, right? Or we think, if I just get on the right career track and I find that right position and I'll show up and I'll give my gifts and my boss and all the people around me will just throw rose petals at my feet as I come in the office because they see the gift that I'm bringing to the world and they're willing to overcompensate me greatly just for being there. You all had that job, right? You see, we're so ingrained in this attitude that as soon as we get the circumstances right, whew, it's good. But spiritual teaching says to us, oh, no. It is different. There is a transcendent reality. There is a presence called peace, called love, called harmony, joy, all good. That is self-existence, awaiting our recognition of it. It is not that we create it, it is that we recognize it. And so we move from a consciousness of not having life happen to us, but realizing we are allowing life to happen through us as we open up our own avenues, as we begin to think in new ways, as we begin to address the emotions that have been perhaps stored over time. We start to move out of that reactive state of being into a responsive way of being. We move into an observer state of mind that witnesses this divine presence that is all around us. And we realize we don't have to go anywhere to be abundant. We're abundant beings now. We don't have to do anything to be lovable or loved. We just simply have to awaken to the presence of love. We don't have to do anything. But we have to be something. We have to re-identify ourselves not as the mind, not as the emotions, not as the bodies, but as this spiritual essence. And so as we move into that awareness, we begin to see that it is in the power of now, that it is in this holy instant where we awaken. You see, the Buddha was trying to help us understand what it meant to be an enlightened being. He said it is the end of suffering. It is when we are willing to release, to stop our grasping and our attachment, to be willing to release our resistance to what is. You see, when we resist, how many of us spend time every day saying things like, this shouldn't be this way? Nobody? Really? Okay, one. All right, well then I'm going to talk to you. Because, right? That works so well. This shouldn't be this way. You look back 5 minutes later, still that way. Right? Still that way. How many of us spend time using this creative faculty we've been given called imagination to imagine all of the worst things that might happen either to ourselves or our children? But we call it worry, and somehow that's noble. I just worry about you. Thank you. How about just holding a high thought with me? Right? Right? Am I getting too close to home here? Do we need to talk something abstract? Okay. Right? And so when we can bring our focus and our awareness back to this moment, when we can open our being to this moment by paying attention to what's happening right now, by even doing the most mundane things with intentionality, with mindfulness. I was speaking, I've been spending quite a bit of time in the gym of late, and looking fabulous. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So I know you wanted to say it. I just thought I'd beat you to the punch. And the reason I am doing that is because I've made a commitment to myself to practice greater self-care. A lot of the things that are happening as a result of the proper intention. It's wonderful. But I noticed just in this gym, how many of us are there, and everybody has things stuck in their ears. There's really no interaction going on. I have interaction with my personal trainer. Oh, by the way, I have a personal trainer now. Let me just point out something to you. A personal trainer is not like a personal shopper. Okay? I was saying, great, I'll get a personal trainer. He can do the work. Oh, no. No. Apparently he wants me to do everything. I have to do everything. And there I am, back to my victimized life. Just like that, right? There was a point. Oh, yes, I remember the point. So here's me. On my treadmill, with a TV screen, with my music playing in there. So this is not mindfulness. I just want you to understand. This is being distracted. And we all are really good at it now, right? If I could figure out one more thing to do in that whole process, I'd add that in, right? But mindfulness says take the walk and be present with the walk. Be present with where your steps are. Be present with the breath. Be present with the beauty that's around you. And when we move into that place, we see that we are a part of a greater whole, part of a greater something, that life is happening all around us, and it's pretty darn magnificent, isn't it? Yes, thank you. Can I have a hallelujah? Thank you. All right. So he says to us, understand that mind is a tool. Now think about this. Many of us have tools, but we don't carry our hammer with us all day long in the event that we may need to hit something. Right? We get the hammer, we put the thing in the wall, we put the hammer down and put it aside. He says mind is a tool. The problem is most of us are so addicted to our thinking that we don't ever stop. Some of us are so addicted to our thinking that we wake up in the middle of the night to think some more. Right? Am I leaving anybody out? I just want to make sure I offend every person in the room before we're done here today. Right? But he's saying there's a way of setting that aside. There's a way of breathing into the moment. There's a way of being still. And this is why our spiritual practice becomes so important, because it's helping us to learn to disengage, as he says, to disidentify with the mind, to realize that we are this sentient being who has a mind, who has emotions, who has a physical body, but it is not who we are. Who we are is spiritual magnificence. Who we are is fully orbed in the completeness, for we are one with that which is the source of all. And when we can live from that state of awareness, then we find peace. Not because everybody changed around us, but because we changed and we experience the fullness of life. So it begins by practicing learning the process of observation. It begins by learning to be still, to practice through prayer and meditation, to be mindful in what we're doing. Brother Lawrence spoke about this idea of practicing the presence, was the little book he has. And he talks about when you wash your dishes, wash your dishes. He didn't say this, but he said, don't make your list of shopping that you need to do after you wash the dishes. Don't plan your next meal once your dishes are clean, but be present for what's happening now. You see, mindfulness is a discipline. And when we can be mindful of what is, what's happening with my breath, what's happening in my body, observing the emotion. You see, I teach a very simple process, and all these poor students that have been bombarded by me for 4 years becoming practitioners can recite to you as much as I can recite to you what I teach. But here's the essence of it. If we will listen to what we're feeling without judgment, and here's what I've decided. I'm not going to give up judgment. I've just decided. It's not working. But I am willing to suspend it. And my goal is to suspend it for longer and longer points of time, right? So So if I can suspend judgment about what I'm feeling, you shouldn't feel that way. Anybody ever had somebody say that to you? You shouldn't feel that way. You don't get to determine my feeling, excuse me, right? I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I'm going to own it. Even if it's not a nice emotion that you don't do. I know you don't do it, but try it. You might find there's some of it there. It's called anger. I am feeling. What am I feeling? And I realize that that's being generated through me. Then I can ask myself the question, what is it I need? You see, our feelings always point to a need that we hold. And so when we honor the feeling, we can listen to the need. And when we listen to the need, now we get to become powerful and choose what we want. Now, just as a hint, if your first choice is for your spouse to be different, you're not there yet. The what I want is how do I choose to be in the world? You see, I was saying, I chose at the beginning of this year, I made a powerful choice for myself that I would practice, I would learn the art and discipline of extraordinary self-care. I realized in doing that I had to do some things differently. And so I began that journey. And it's a fabulous and wonderful thing. No longer did I have to make everybody be different around me, so I didn't have to be so stressed out. I could just be at peace. No longer did I wait to take care of my body until everything else was done, but I just made that a part of my regimen. So yes, I know I look like I have a rock hard body. Not quite yet, but lighting's good here. But it was never about the body. I want us to hear this. When we make the choice of who we want to be, what are the spiritual qualities that we want to incorporate in our lives, then we follow that on with the action that supports that way of being. Most of us do not need something more to do. We're good at doing. Most of us are learning how to be differently. And in learning how to be different, action follows from that place. And so we start doing different action that supports our new way of being. Eckhart Tolle is saying to us that there is a gap. There's a place beyond our thinking, beyond our emotions, beyond our body. And when we can move into that gap, we recognize our true and divine nature. It is the same message. You see, we don't have to go off to a mountaintop somewhere to experience enlightenment. It happens in the present, in this moment. And we start to pay attention to who is in front of us now, to what is happening around us, to suspend judgment about it and to just welcome and to realize that we are self-generative beings. And as we practice this way of spiritual being, then we become enlightened. We learn to be at peace. We learn to be responsive to life. We learn to be conscious co-creators of the reality that we would enjoy. It all happens now. And the next now. And the next now. So when we find ourselves too far out into the future, too stuck in the past, bring it back to what's happening now. What's happening now? And breathe into that awareness. Over this next month, we'll talk about how do you plan if all you're ever going to do is be in the now. We'll talk about that because it's a valid thing to look at. But here's what my invitation to you as we move through this next moment, day, week. Just practice asking yourself, where am I now? Am I here? Or am I in the future? Or am I in the past? No judgment. Just notice. Because in the noticing, we can choose then to breathe into the moment, to pay attention, and thereby find the power of now. Let us pray. As we move into this state of being, this state of recognition of the eternal divine presence, this one life that is forever and ever expressing itself in and through and as all creation. We realize that there is indeed one life, one mind, one power, one essence, one being. And that it is true, as the Master spoke, that we live and move and have our being in this divine presence. We open our hearts to the presence of unconditional love, our minds to divine wisdom. We recognize our bodies as the vessel for the essence of who we are to make itself known in the world. Doing so, we simply speak this word of truth this day as we remember our divine essence. And we know that right here and right now we are abundant beings, for we are one with the source and the substance of all good. So joyously we give and graciously receive of our entire bounty. For as the Master said, if we seek first this kingdom, then all these other things are added unto us. We move into the presence and the awareness of unconditional love, that which never withholds itself. And so we joyously forgive ourselves and those who we perceived has harmed us, moving into the presence of love that can see beyond behavior, that can see beyond experience. We simply open our hearts to a greater experience, and our lives are healed and transformed. We speak the word of truth as we recognize this divine presence as wholeness, that is revealing itself as health, as well-being, as vitality, that is animating every cell and every system in our physical body. We claim for ourselves right here and right now our greater good, realizing that it exists within us. And as we recognize that light that is within, it shines brightly to heal and transform our lives in all ways. How blessed we are. And so in this holy instant, we give thanks. We give thanks for the many blessings in our life, both those realized and those yet to be realized. We bless this spiritual community, for it serves and guides and directs so many of us and is a powerful presence for good in the world. We bless our brothers and sisters around the planet this day. We are holding a high vision for a world that works for all, a high vision for a planet that is at peace, a planet that is whole and harmonious. And as always, we extend a blessing to all those who would teach truth, whether priest or rabbi, minister, or whatever other name. All these spiritual teachers, we honor and bless them, for we know there are many pathways to the divine, and we honor and celebrate them all. How good it is to know this truth. And so in joy and gratitude, I'm simply giving thanks for this inner awareness. As I speak this word of truth, I know it goes into that law of mind, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned. And so it is with profound joy and gratitude I simply give thanks, releasing the word, allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.